Good to go? All right, great. Well, welcome everybody. This is the Education and Local Economy Scrutiny Commission, and I'm the chair. My name's Cassandra. I'm a councillor for South Bermondsey. We're not a decision-making body. This commission's role is to make recommendations for consideration by the Cabinet. So that is what we are here to do tonight. There are no planned fire alarm tests this evening, so if you do hear the fire alarm, please leave by the nearest fire exit and make your way to the agreed assembly point, which is St John's Churchyard, just off of Druid Street. Council staff, of course, will direct you if that happens. And the public toilets are located just off the main reception area on the right as you walked in. Just a few instructions: please switch off your mobile phone if you haven't already, or put it to silent. Anyone in the audience is welcome to film, audio record, screenshot or post the public proceedings of the meeting online. And I ask you to please be considerate towards people in the room and take care not to disturb the proceedings. And if you do decide to film the meeting, please do not film anyone in the audience. A copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on the Southwark Council website, and the Council's free internet is called Southwark Free Wi-Fi. It doesn't need a password if you want to access it. This meeting is being live streamed via the Microsoft Teams platform to YouTube, and it will be uploaded to the Southwark Council YouTube channel by tomorrow. Can I remind members, as always, to raise your hand if you wish to speak, and wait until I've given you permission to speak before you contribute. Please could I ask members and officers to also ensure that they keep the microphone close when they speak, because it's quite hard for people to hear online if you don't do that. And as always, please refrain from digressing onto other issues. Keep comments and questions concise and specific to the agenda being discussed so that we can have a productive and efficient meeting. I think that tonight we should close out the meeting by 8:45 latest, so if everyone could help me achieve that, I would appreciate it. Okay, so in terms of the agenda for the evening, we will start with apologies. So I've had apologies from Martin Bracknell, co-opted member, and also from Councillor Hartley. Any other apologies from anybody else? No? Okay. Right, so in that case, we'll go through the confirmation of voting members that are here. I'm a voting member, I'm Cassandra Brown, and I'm the chair. So when I say your name, please just show your hand or respond verbally to confirm that that is you. Councillor Rachel Bentley, Vice Chair.
That is me.
Excellent. Councillor Irina Von Wies.
Present.
Excellent. Councillor Mohammed Dean is not here. Councillor Margie Newlands.
I am Councillor Margie Newlands.
Glad to hear it. Councillor John Hartley has sent apologies. Councillor Youssef Hussain is not here. Okay, in terms of voting co-opted members, Alan Callan.
Present.
Excellent. Mana Carbo.
Present.
And Claire Williams.
Present.
Oh, great. Thank you. On to agenda item 2, which is the notification of any items of business which I deem to be urgent. There are no urgent items as far as I am aware. Anyone else? No? Okay, fab. Cool. And then on to item 3, disclosure of interests and dispensations. Does anyone on the committee have an interest or a dispensation that they need to declare? No. Fab. Okay, and item 4, on to the minutes. So we do need to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December. The minutes are in the supplementary agenda pack. Hopefully people have had a chance to read them. Does anyone wish to share anything that seems incorrect or they need to flag? No? Okay. Great, so on to the substantive items. So we have 2 tonight. So first of all, we'll have our interview with HATS. So Dan Hardy, I believe you are here representing HATS this evening, fabulous. And then next we will have an update on the Charlotte Sharman and St Mary Magdalene closures. So yeah, Dan, if you want to come up to the front here, that would be appreciated. And yes, just there, yeah, and for everyone in the room and online, so HATS are a private provider of patient healthcare, mental health and support to school children in Southwark, school children specifically with special education needs and disabilities. Yeah, Dan, we've invited you here because we wanted to learn more about what you do, understand a bit about kind of the experience that you have and that you hear from parents and children, and perhaps where the council might be able to make improvements in regard to the contract that they have with you. Over to you. It'd be great if you could just say very briefly a bit more about what you do and comment on kind of the experience that you've seen.
So, can you hear me? Yes. So, I look after the operational side of the business for South London, ranging through every morning. All it takes is for a couple of things to go wrong on the road, and you're inundated with either calls coming in whilst you're trying to make calls out. So there will always be those sort of challenges trying to handle a high demand of jobs to do in a short period of time. But generally speaking, the operations are fairly steady. Obviously, across the nation, there's a driver shortage at the moment, so that also presents its challenges. But again, we've got the staff numbers and things moving steady. We invested a lot in upskilling drivers with lesser licences, which got us some traction and that certainly helped us stabilise things over the last 12 months. In terms of, safety, well-being, I feel like there's quite a good communication chain. Southwark have been quite responsive in terms, whenever there's a concern raised, they're quite responsive and things are dealt with fairly quickly. However, we're always looking to improve those sort of things, and I know you've had a recent change of management, and the new person, I believe her name's Susanna, off the top of my head, she's been doing very well from what I hear, and has been trying to streamline a lot of the processes between HATS and the local authority. And from what I hear, my team are very positive about those changes and feel that there's been a significant improvement. Communication to parents, like I say, I think whatever you do and however well you get it, communication is going to be one of those things that you could always do better. It's one of those things about how quickly and prioritising what are the most important comms out of these 15 or 20 calls I've got to make. And of course, parents, especially any parent, is obviously shows a lot of concern for their child. They have a heightened concern for their child compared to themselves. So any parent, when you're dealing with delays education, is going to be quite a sensitive matter, particularly when you've got special needs children. It becomes even more heightened, and if you've got multiple special needs children, you can imagine that is even more important. So we have to bear that in mind when we're dealing with these sensitive calls. And we've got things like now, like we try to use technology to improve upon these things. There's something.
Sorry, Dan, to interrupt. Could you let go of the button?
Sorry. It was like an intercom. Yes, I've lost my space now, as I say. So we try and use technology to sort of improve on what we can do with those things. So what we've got at the moment that has been running for a while is the parent app in this case. So what that allows is parents to log onto the app, see where their vehicle is. If we've got messages we'd like to get out to a particular route, we're now able to do that. I think we're going to make significant progress with that in the coming months, because what's transpired in recent sort of focus groups, for lack of a better term, in the feedback we're getting, is that the parents have struggled to use it. There's a number of reasons why across the spectrum, but what we found is we've been when that person has been reported to us, we've been giving them a personal call back, talking to them about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, should I say, and we've been talking them through the problem, and they've been logging on, and that person or that parent, should I say, then doesn't feel the need to call back. So the call volumes are coming down, and those sort of pressures are really improving. We've got like I say, Susanna's set up some systems, and there's now a 3-day sort of an internal agreed KPI for a 3-day response on a complaint. Unless there's a significant reason it would take longer. For example, we want to check tracking, there's more people to interview, etc., etc. And that has just improved the flow of communication when there is a concern raised. It's helped to get information back to a parent quicker. And like I said, all parents have a heightened concern, especially if in these cases where the children have special needs. So improving that communication, the parents feeling that stuff's moving, because it's very common in this day and age that you've got to investigate things thoroughly, and it's very hard to comment too much until you understand all the facts and have come to the conclusions. But when you're a parent of a special needs child and you need the assurance that the concern's being addressed and that the concern that you've raised isn't going to happen again tomorrow, that's not always good enough from their perspective, and anyone that's a parent, I think, can completely understand that. So I think just having that sort of extra drive and KPI agreed between us has massively improved and brought down those anxieties, for lack of a better term.
And I did just want to add a bit of context for the Commission as well, because one of the sort of driving forces behind us inviting you along was because a complaint had been brought to our attention around, I think it was that drivers were kind of leaving children on the buses for perhaps longer than needed to, while that driver perhaps went and did an errand, got some food, whatever it might have been. I think that's kind of what's triggered this. So just to give the context of the Commission, that's why you're talking about complaints specifically and the comms around that.
Okay. Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. Makes sense completely. So yeah, well, I'm happy to say that those improvements have already been made, and they're already being felt, certainly on my side, and has been fed back through the team. Obviously, I'm not familiar with all of the facts in the specific case that you're talking about, but obviously whenever you're managing staff in any environment, and that, whether, for me, from my context, whether that's patient transport, mental health, home to schools, managing people, it comes with those things. You can't always be over them to control them, but obviously that's why we've got processes in place, and that's why we do what we can to improve these things. So obviously we've got a AI system in place now, an AI CCTV system, should I say, in the vehicles. I'm not sure at what stage we're at with Southwark. Yeah, so this is something that we've been rolling out across the local authorities, and it depends on our engagement with you and where you've been at with it, but I believe Southwark is fully running and operational. And that basically allows us to investigate, it allows us to monitor drivers' behaviour. So first of all, just for example, if the driver was to pick up his PDA whilst driving, the AI system would flag, he gets his jobs through. For the life of me at the moment, I can't remember what it actually stands for yet, but it's essentially his handheld device that we could call him on, send the jobs through to him, etc., etc. So yeah, if the driver was to misuse that PDA, pick up a phone call, etc., whilst he was driving, that AI system would send us a notification and say, this person's misbehaving, this is what we think he's done. We'd be able to access that and check that and investigate it, and obviously come to a conclusion a lot quicker than we would be able to if a member of the public had said, I think I saw your driver driving a van and 2 of the registration numbers were this and that. It allows us to get to the bottom of these things a lot quicker. And obviously with that, in that system, it obviously reports things as well, like speeding, aggressive driving, anything else that might happen in the vehicle. Now, when it comes to the children, they're very clever, these systems nowadays, it actually blanks out the children's faces. So in terms of anyone that reviews that CCTV, they'd never be able to see the children's faces. But obviously, in terms of, from a HAT's perspective, it's a very expensive system, but it pays dividends time and time again. Yeah, in any sort of incident or complaint that we get, it allows us to get to the hub of the issue, deal with the issue in the most appropriate way, and put the measures in place we need to prevent it again. I can't speak highly enough of what that system allows us to do in terms of better monitoring and management of our staff. Yeah, so there's that, and obviously, so we just had a big meeting with a load of stakeholders, LADO, school staff, the trust, I wouldn't trust the local authority. Sorry, I was too many different clients nowadays. And it was just talking about things like communication and how we, between all of our different bodies, are going to ensure that everyone stays informed with these comms. So I think it's, I think we've got the bones of a really good, promising future when you put together the new systems, technology that we've got in the vehicles, alongside the new processes that have been agreed with Susanna. I think we're in a really good space.
Got it, thanks. And when you talk about those new processes with Susanna, who is Susanna and why did those processes start to be looked at and get changed? What was the trigger moment? It
was about response times on complaints. We were getting a lot of parents that felt that they weren't getting feedback they needed soon enough, and just general communication was a general theme for us. Like I say, there's a lot of... The thing is, the difference with the Home to Schools operation in comparison to the other operations I look after is everything happens at the same time. Yeah, so you've got a team. We might move 200 patients a day for a hospital, but that's throughout the day, and in any 1 hour there might only be 10 or 20. But when it comes to Home to Schools, we've got 300 clients all being picked up and dropped off within an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute window. So there's a lot that happens. There's a lot that can go wrong, and obviously to deliver the best and most assuring service, people need the communication, and I think that's where the improvements on communication have been key to assuring parents, assuring all the stakeholders that things are going in the right direction.
Before I open it up to questions beyond what I've asked, is there anything else you want to say up front?
No, I think I've covered what I've got in my mind anyway.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'm sure we'll have some interesting things to dig into based on what you've said. Anybody want to pop themselves on the list to ask a question? All right. Councillor Bentley, you could go first. And then, cool.
Thank you for coming along. So I think, if it would be helpful, I think you've described, as you say, I think you've come in and told us some of the problems and kind of how you're dealing with it. Can you take a step back and provide us with a bit more kind of insight into how things actually work? So if I have a child, I live here, my child goes to a school that's suitable for their needs, another part of the borough, is one of your drivers going to come to my house, pick up my child, and then would there be other stops along the way before they get to the school? Is it kind of everybody's kind of picked up and taken to that particular school?
Yeah.
And then I guess repeat on the way home, so how that's kind of tracked and followed. I guess the second point, and I'm assuming the answer is yes, but would all your drivers be kind of DBS checked and all that? I'm assuming
yes, of course. Yeah, 100%.
And then what would happen if, for example, when you came to my house to pick up my child was ill and not able to go to school that day? How does that kind of get logged and registered with Southwark Council? Thank you.
So, on a day-to-day basis, obviously Southwark Council plan the route, so to speak. Yeah. So when they're handed to us, we get told, here's route 1 going to Cherry Gardens, just for example, and these are the children you need to pick up. Sometimes we get guidance from the local authority as to what the pick-up times should be. Sometimes it's a bit of a joint operation and we say, well, we'll look at that and these are the times, etc. So at the start of the year, when everything goes well and the information comes over in a timely fashion, if the route is a known route to us, and we've got the known crew, etc., a risk assessment may not be required. Yeah, if the route is not known to us, we may need to do a risk assessment, which may involve, it could be a remote assessment where we're making phone calls and checking things remotely. It could be that actually, due to the complexity, the location, etc., that we want a physical risk assessment done. So at the point of commencement, in theory, we've mapped out the risks, we've thought about the different scenarios, and we've got a plan for a regular route to take place every morning, and normally the same route in the afternoons. There are some anomalies where possibly a child has an after-school club, and it's really. But return homes, because of, especially if a parent has multiple special needs children, there could be allowances made where they get another bus to pick up a child that was an after-school club. There are anomalies to it, but generally speaking, 98% of the children will go home the same way they came in. The other variable would be respite centres. Yeah, that would just change the route a little bit. So obviously, if the parents need a bit of respite and the child needs respite, that might change the route a little bit. And it may even be that the child goes on a completely different bus to that respite centre, because the respite centre's logistically in a different area. But generally speaking, that's how the routes are set up in their creation. And then from day to day, we go on the route. We plan to have the same drivers and PAs allocated to them on a day-to-day basis. The drivers' annual leaves and the PAs.
What does that mean?
The passenger assistants.
Okay, so there's always two people.
Yeah, so I think in Southwark you call them pupil support assistants. Yeah, so but yeah, so they're the same thing for this conversation. Sorry. So they have regular drivers, regular PAs wherever possible. Our contracts with them don't allow them to book annual leave in school time, so they have their annual leave outside of it. So the only reason it should ever happen is due to sort of a personal circumstance, a family emergency or sickness is the only reason there should be disruptions to it. If the crew call in sick, the process is that a notification should go out to those parents immediately. So as soon as we know, hopefully that happens before the mad rush in the morning, and everyone should be told it's just a change of driver, but your regular PA or PSA in your guys' case is still on, so that gives them assurance. So that's sort of the baseline on it leaving. If we get there and we've got no answer at the door, this is sort of the most problematic thing for us in terms of disturbances on the route. So you're left with a bit of a conundrum. Obviously, we work with the local authority on it when it happens. We have to call, speak to someone from the local authority and say, this is what's happening, what do you think we should do? Obviously, the normal mindset of these things, because we've got so many children to pick up and try to get them to school on time, it doesn't leave a great window for each parent. Because if we gave them all a 5-minute window and 8 children, that's 40 minutes extra onto the route. So we'd either be planning to get to the school 40 minutes early if everyone was on time, or we're going to be 40 minutes late in that case. Yeah, so that could be the most disruptive. If we find that the child's sick, obviously we notify the local authority. We probably wouldn't leave the crew there waiting to be told to be pulled off by the local authority. We'd say, okay, we've got confirmation, move on, we'll let the local authority know. Now we've got the technology, we use Cordic, it's a system called Cordic, it's a transport system. The children now are all logged on, and the PDA that the driver uses, he has the options to sort of say pick up, no pick up, and now we're working on the type of reporting so that we can put out data on a weekly or monthly basis, and we can just send that straight over to the local authority and say, there's your attendance. So it's capable of doing that. We're just tweaking the reports to make sure we're getting the optimal outputs from it. I think that was...
And so on that point, so if a child was sick, and couldn't go to school, would Southwark Council would you still charge Southwark Council? Like, how does the pricing work? Is that still, or is there, because you've already kind of shown up at their house, just thinking about how that works?
So traditionally, I'll be absolutely sincere, I'm not intricately familiar with the Southwark pricing model, because different local authorities do use very different models from local authority to local authority, and I'm just not on the ground with Southwark enough to give you specifics on that. But I understand there's a few different pricing models that we operate. One would be set based on the route, and if it was set based on the route, if the child's sick, the route cost would still remain the same. On the models that are per child, I believe it would give you a reduction on the cost. So not if we showed up and found out the child was sick, that would still go, the charge would be the same. If it was cancelled ahead of time, I believe it's worked out based on the average, not the average, but based on the amount of children on the route, and it would come down slightly. Obviously, the way those models work is we still have to assure we've got the baseline costs covered in every which scenario, but there would definitely be a reduction if you're on one of those models. I'm sorry I can't be more specific on that, just not being.
Cool. Councillor von Bees?
thank you very much. Most of the questions were already answered, and forgive me if you provided some of this information before. But so how many drivers do you employ, and how are they vetted apart from DBS checks? What kind of training do they get? What kind of prior experience do they need?
Could you move your mobile phone? On that side, yeah, that's probably good.
Curse. And also, I was wondering, so there is a PSA for each child or for each van? How many children would there be in each vehicle? And if something happens, for example, there is a crisis with one of the children, is there always somebody with them? And if so, does that mean you have to stop the vehicle, or how does it work in practice if there is some form of crisis while you are driving?
Yeah, now this is probably the more interesting parts of the job. So just to give you assurance, yes, everyone is DBS checked. Home to schools, it just wouldn't be conceivable to start someone without a DBS check. It's just not even on the table at all. The training they get, so the passenger assistants get what it's called PATS training. It's an abbreviation. I'm pretty sure it stands for passenger assistance training, so it wasn't very creative. And the drivers get MIDAS training, which is minibus driver awareness scheme. Yeah, it's very in-depth, I would say, for what they do. Now, obviously, it's not going to compare much to a SEN teacher. They haven't gone to university, but what they get is they get quite an in-depth walk through the spectrum of needs that they would likely encounter. The best way. The drivers and the PA. So both of the PATS and the MIDAS are very similar. In fact, they're almost identical in terms of the interactions with the clients. Yeah, the driver's element gets an additional bit to cover things like the checking of the vehicle and safety aspects for their additional responsibility beyond the PAs. But in terms of the interactions with the clients and the ability to clamp and secure wheelchairs and that sort of equipment that you might anticipate encountering, they're both fully trained on both of those. In terms of, and they additionally get some safeguarding training, they additionally get first aid training as well. And in some cases, depending on the complexity of the children, there are requirements to have additional bolt-ons. But as a baseline, everyone would have the PATS or MIDAS. They're sort of the equivalent, safeguarding and first aid. That is the raw, absolute essentials. Some children have very complex needs and require things like buckle. I struggle with the second. Buckle. we call it buckle in the game. Midazolam. I struggle to say that word. Midazolam, as you can see. Some of them require buckle midazolam, which is it's a drug that needs to be administered by, and that's obviously on the very high end of things. You could get EpiPens and things like that obviously require a little bit of a belt on, but they all get that sort of training. If something was to happen on the vehicle, so let's talk about different types of crises. A child could start unclothing. Yeah, that's obviously a very sensitive one. You've got members of the public that can see. It's a challenging problem because your decision based on the moment, it depends on where you are, what that environment dictates. Obviously, you can't drive the vehicle if someone's not in the seat. So if the child's unclothing in the vehicle and they're not buckled up, the vehicle would have to come to a stop in the first and foremost. Normally, in that situation, so in the training, they're trained to try to distract children, get them onto a different wavelength of thinking when these sort of things are going on. You would find that quite often telling the child with SEN, obviously every child is unique, so it's very hard to put a blanket solution on anything. But you find quite often that saying no or don't do that is not a good approach to resolving it, which is what we'd probably do in normal life, is say, no, that's not right, please stop that. But it can be a very challenging situation. So we try to, of course, first of all, we've got to worry about safety on the vehicle. Someone's not belted up. If there's other children on the vehicle as well, again, it could be more challenging. But the first and foremost would be pulling the vehicle over, getting the situation under control, and trying to ensure that everyone remains dignity, keep their dignity in the forefront of our minds as well. So there are challenges. Obviously, the driver would probably be, in this instance, calling the office to say, this is going on. The PA is trying her best, or his best, to get this situation resolved. And, the problem is with that, obviously, we do not want to physically intervene with children ever, if we can help it. But when we're leaving the PAs and the drivers to judge that line on when they should physically intervene in a situation and when they shouldn't, and it can be very hard. I would expect the driver to call in whilst the PA is first trying to resolve it and try to get advice. I would expect the office to advise the driver to keep the vehicle secure, to make sure no one can run, and support the PA as much as she can to get the child to get their clothes back on. Now, obviously, I would expect the local authority initially to call the parent to let them know that this is going on as well. If in the worst case scenarios where it can't be just immediately resolved on the side of the road because the child's not listening, etc., quite often parents need to come out and support. That is normally worst case scenario. In another scenario, the children get up and they start fighting each other. It's another very challenging situation. It's a fine line for the crews, and when they physically intervene and when they don't. But they will step in, and quite often they're taking punches instead of the child behind them that was taking the punches a minute ago. There's children that spit surprisingly far. So even when you're in the vehicle as the PA, they could be getting spat at, etc., etc. We might provide them with PPE in some cases. We try to move the seats around. It has been the case that the child wants to spit at another child, and that other child is the target.
Can I ask a quick question just on that, just thinking about all of this? Do you know how much those drivers are paid?
I've definitely got a figure in my mind, Would you like to know?
Yes.
So the PSV drivers are paid £15.40 an hour. The non-PSV drivers are paid London Living Wage. The passenger assistants are paid London Living Wage.
And just quick follow up, so what is the maximum ratio of
I was getting to that.
Children. Oh,
too many scenarios, sorry. There is so many scenarios, and I think that's the problem. I had a list of about 30 in my mind, and I was trying to pick the most sort of severe ones for you. But there's a limit of 9 students per 1 PA on the vehicle. So if it goes over 9, we'd expect a second PA. Again, it's risk assessed based on complexity. So there could be a route that has 1 child on, that has 2 PAs on as well. So, but if there's no extreme complexities to consider, the threshold would be 9.
And is most minivans, is that for 9 students, or do you have really bigger ones with more children and more PAs on it?
I don't think we can get many, because of the restrictions we've got. There would definitely be some anomalies, so there'll be some that are larger and there'll be some that are smaller, I'm sure. But for the younger children, there's a limit time that they can be in the vehicle of 45 minutes. And for the older children, there's a limit time of 75 minutes. So it sort of restricts you on what you can actually achieve. And which is probably a good thing, because then obviously it's not just for the journey time, it's a good thing because of the risk, the heightened risk that would be of overloading one of those vehicles.
So that means that the kids, the
Councillor
children...
Robbins, there was a queue. Do you have, is this your final question?
Yes, I promise.
Okay.
So the maximum length of the journey is 45 minutes, and if you get into traffic jam and you haven't reached the school, what happens?
Well, the route's planned to be 45 minutes, but obviously things will happen from time to time, and we would attempt to notify the school. Obviously, at that time of the morning as well, the school can suffer with the say. If they've got 12 buses coming to the school, they might be taking a load of calls, and it might be difficult to get them to answer. But the idea is that they would get a notification.
Thank you. Councillor Newens.
Thank you.
Mike, please.
Thank you. A lot of the questions actually that were in my mind have been covered. But I wanted to ask, so obviously there are a number of our local schools have children with special educational needs and disabilities attending them. Are you taking children to those schools as well, or you are transporting to special schools which are sort of specifically for special needs?
I can confirm the vast majority are certainly special needs schools. I'm sorry to say I'm not intricate. I don't have the intricate knowledge of if any of these are actually mainstream with a special needs section. I'm sorry I couldn't qualify that. I do know as a general rule of thumb that local authorities will consider taking children that meet the criteria of the EHCP, etc., to the mainstream schools. So that will definitely happen. I couldn't confirm what sort of ratio that goes at though, I'm sorry to say.
But in general, you might be dropping at several different schools from one bus, or
we could potentially. It has happened, but again, it would be the anomaly, not the rule. It's very hard to get the schools to tie up in terms of their timetable. Sometimes you can look at the routes logistically; it works going in the morning, but then they will finish at the same time, for example, and the school staffing. If there's after-school clubs and there's things like that sort of plotted in for the children, but obviously it has to work for the parents as well when they get the schedule. So, it happens as an anomaly, not a rule. I think in my experience, if we've got 50 routes, there might be one or two that can achieve that. That's the sort of ratio that we generally look at, that I generally observe anyway, I would say.
Thank you. And in terms, so 50 routes sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
I suppose that also I'm quite interested in the scale of the operation then that you run, because obviously, I represent Dulwich Village Ward in the south of the borough. Turney School is just over the border in Lambeth, and I see Hats vans going, buses going in there. Does Hats then sort of, it is a pan-London operation, or is it sort of limited to certain boroughs? How does that, and to what degree, I suppose, I'm also interested, I suppose it's less to do with, as much as anything to do with also how our special educational needs service also functions. Are you generally transporting within the borough, or are you bringing children from other boroughs to Southwark schools, or vice versa? How does that look?
Yeah, so our operation, is certainly London-wide. We have operations that reach outside of London as well. In terms of where the children are coming from, going to, etc. Generally speaking, it is quite insular within each local authority. There are obviously long distance schools that do happen. Again, I would say, again, it is the anomaly, but there are a lot more of those anomalies. Yeah, so in my experience, it's hard for me to say because I just know from a transport provider what we get awarded. So I don't necessarily see what the local authority has. But again, I would say, in terms of my history, in terms of when I see it comes through at the quote stage, we normally refer to them as boarders because the children. They could be staying in a boarding school, yeah. So even if they come back each week, you end up calling them a boarder. But the boarder runs, I'd say, probably about 10% of the total number. So they're not a big portion of it. But in terms of you and your costings as an observation, they might be a big portion of the costing because they go so much further. So when you look at it as a per child cost, those ones will be astronomically higher than one that's going local on a bus. Yeah, so hopefully that helps answer your question. I think I did.
Yes, thank you. And can I just have one sort of other short question? Within the same bus, would there ever be a scenario, for example, where a child would have a family member with them for support? And I'm also interested. So obviously you talked about the ratio of the assistance to the number of children, but would you ever have a family member? Would there be a situation where that may happen? And also, I'm interested as well, sort of in one bus, what would be the expected sort of age span of the children that you're transporting? Is that something that is that is specified, that has to be limited, or is that sort of just sort of what works as far as the route is concerned?
Yeah, so you say the age of the children. Yeah, so the age of the children, I'd say, again, in my experience, it's plotted, the route itself is plotted by the local authority. So the initial sort of risk assessment on what is suitable is done in the local authority first and then passed on to us. Obviously, we would do our own assessments. If we saw, hang on, something's not gone right here, we would report that and we'd discuss it. And there are times when things don't go as it looked on paper to start with, and it gets changed. But generally speaking, the routes would, because we're generally going to the same school, so I would expect, if you had a child at the lowest tier of that school and a child at the oldest tier living on the same road, I would expect them to be going in the same vehicle to that school, regardless of the age. Obviously, it's not so much about age, but if there's a risk for one of the children's behaviour, and we felt that they posed a risk to another child, and that child wouldn't be reasonable to expect them to be able to defend themselves in any way, obviously that we may end up splitting them up and sending two vehicles there as a result. But that's it. That's so your question was
that was, but also about whether or not you ever would expect to have family members.
Oh yeah, I knew there was another thing that I just couldn't place. So yeah, it may happen. Basically, it's not something, in my experience, not just at Southwark. It's not at all local authorities. It's not something you generally want to encourage, because you've got a bus of possibly 8 children. If you say yes to one parent, you've got to say yes to the others. You've got the potential of a DBS issue there as well. But we would, in those situations, we would work with the local authority on what's most appropriate for that situation. Because I think, again, in a home to school transport, every situation is sort of judged on its own merit. Because like I say, there's the complexities, the range of complexities and the different permutations are, without sounding like silly, it is literally infinite. You could, every scenario has its own situations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
No problem. Councillor Bentley?
So coincidentally, and it's entirely coincidental, today the council has opened a consultation around travel assistance for young people. And I guess one of my questions was, A, were you aware that that is kind of looming? And I think one of the key themes from what I've just kind of scanning it is that kind of desire to make or encourage children where possible to use I guess public transportation if it's possible, and just wanted to kind of, and you may not be the right person to answer this, do you think that there are situations where young people are using the services that you provide, but they may outgrow them, and how, I guess, does that transition, how can that be encouraged in a way that is safe and meets their needs, and also parental guardian suitability?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say in my experience, the children are eager to do that. It's the parents with the concern. So, I think the marketing, if you will, of such a project needs to be focused on the parents more than the children. Yeah, and I think the parents need some. It's a dangerous world at the minute. It's always been a dangerous world, and everyone's feeling it's dangerous at the moment. And I think parents are worried about that, and letting them go to school independently in the long run is something. My child doesn't have special needs, but I worry about the day. He was telling me earlier, when I go to that school, I'll be walking by myself. I said, I'm not sure you will. Yeah. And that's the truth. If my child had special needs, that fear would be even greater. And I think that's your biggest challenge to overcome is that fear. What would people be like to my child if they were by themselves on the bus? What would their interactions be like? While we're doing the travel training, I would suggest that that in that programme, the travel trainer needs to be very communicative with the parents about it's the only opportunity you've got to really assure the parent. And I think that would be where I put my effort, would be assuring the parents and making sure if they engage in the training that you know that they get that feedback from day to day. Because the thing is as well, what every parent wants is to see their child flourish. Yeah, and obviously going on a home to schools bus every day isn't the ideal scenario to encourage that. So if we work on those positives and try to alleviate the fears they have, I think that's the best route to getting more pick up on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do just want to comment on the consultation, and then I'll bring you in, because, Vice Chair Councillor Bentley just alerted me to it as well, and it is very interesting and timely, and one of the key points is also around potential introduction of pick-up points for pupils.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but presumably that means instead of from home, it would be like a more central location. Has that been trialled before? Or
I've been part of trials at other local authorities. It depends on, obviously there's so many variables in it, but obviously you as a local authority would need to have sort of strong leadership in that, because it's not going to be a popular option. It will require parents to do more, because they have to meet at pick-up points. In terms of the sort of outcomes, I mean, if I be completely sort of transparent, it's almost an incentive to encourage the independent travel training as well, because number one, the parents are sort of half doing it in terms of that routine, because it's no longer picking up from home. We are picking up from a bus stop, essentially. Yeah, may not be the Transport for London one, but that is what it is. And that they'll get their own sense of, you know, my son, my daughter, my child is able to do this. And but yeah, it wasn't popular when I saw it set up. But generally speaking, the logistics works. It all depends whether the parents are able and whether they're entitled or not to be picked up from home, if you know what I mean. You've got that sort of dilemma and that question.
Presumably it's a cost-cutting exercise from the council's
100%,
perspective.
100%.
That's the main benefit.
Yes. And of course your carbon emissions as well, obviously, and everyone's trying to go greener. Yeah, it makes things a lot more efficient.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Van Bees.
That's been answered.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. Yeah, Councillor Bentley, come in.
Yeah, I was going to chime in. Skimming this consultation, it's very clear that it sets out the cost per pupil and all those things. So yes,
You've had a bit more of a look
and I
into
have
it.
shared it with the councillors on the group.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a couple more questions. I can't help but notice you're wearing an NHS lanyard.
Yeah.
What's the official link between Hats and the NHS?
In a similar way, we work for local authorities, we work for the NHS, we transport patients to and from their hospital appointments. It's generally outpatients and discharges. We do touch on the more critical stuff, blue light transport, along with HDU, cardiacs. That's the smaller end of it, but the vast majority of our work is patient transport service and mental health transport as well.
Got it.
Yeah, so we work with a lot of trusts and a lot of local authorities over London. That was the other part of your question I forgot. We're almost all the local authorities. I think there was like 3 or 4 we're missing the set on.
Got it. And last question from me. So I guess this used to be a service that was in-house with the council many, many years ago. And I think I always worry about the tension between a privately owned company running something like this, which is clearly focused on profit, efficiency. In your kind of quarterly reviews or whatever it might be with Susanna, I'm not quite sure what her role is, but it sounds like she works for the council.
That's right.
Is kind of the quality versus cost piece a regular agenda item? Like, what do those conversations sound like?
To be honest, I'm sorry, I can't say about the more local meetings, i.e. the monthly meetings and what those interactions are like, because I'm just not part of those interactions. I can say that generally, as a general rule of thumb, including Southwark, those costs versus quality are reviewed at least annually, if not more than that. And yeah, we're very, like I say, there are at least official monthly management meetings with the LBS team and HATS, and I'm sure there will be a lot more meetings than that as and when they're required across the months as well. Cost for local authorities is a constant concern, and it's constantly raised. Yes, and I think that's fair as a due diligence point. Everyone wants to make sure they're getting the right products and the right services for what they're spending the money on. But I'd say I feel that I'd be wrong to say it's not reviewed regularly, because I think it's a constant thought in the local authorities' mind, and it's something we're constantly working on with them in terms of innovation and how we can reduce things.
Great, thank you. All right, I think we're coming to a close on this agenda item. Some really interesting findings, I think, for the Commission here. Hopefully not duplicating the consultation, but perhaps we can support it as well based on this conversation. I think, certainly I'm thinking about a lot in terms of particularly cost. And I remember you saying that there's different pricing models for different local authorities. Of course, the council does have power of purchasing agreements in other areas. Could that be a way to make this more efficient for you and cheaper for the council? That's something I'm thinking about. Certainly making sure that all of your staff are paid the living wage. I think that would be a great next step. Just some of the things you've said around your experience of perhaps altering the service based on the proposals that are coming through. I think we could perhaps make sure we're putting a view on that to Cabinet. Does anyone disagree with what I've said there in terms of those recommendations? Anything else we should be pointed about, do you think?
Chair, I think the points that you've made are very valid.
Okay.
But nothing to add.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thanks very much, Dan, for coming. It's been very insightful. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should I be sitting down or leave?
Well, you're welcome to stay if you'd like.
I'm absolutely fine.
Yeah, go home and have your dinner. Yeah, you too. Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.
No worries.
Okay, and next up we have agenda item. It's gone from 6 to 7, but I think this is 6. Whatever this agenda item number is, it's the update on Charlotte Sharman and it is 5. Okay, I mean it doesn't really matter because I do have a different agenda. Well, it's not a different agenda, but it's a different document to everybody else. Oh dear, it's been a long week. So yes, update on Charlotte Sharman and St Mary Magdalene pupils post-closure or amalgamation, I'm thinking. So we've got Neil Gordon-Orr, the Assistant Director for Education Access, Children and Adult Services. So yes, thank you for coming, Neil. It would be great to get an update on how that went and what you're hearing, positives, negatives, and where we might learn from what happened there in future instances.
Yeah, good evening. The background to this is obviously the ongoing issue with the falling numbers of pupils across Southwark and indeed across London. London Council's published a report last week saying that the challenges Southwark are facing are obviously very similar to other local authorities are facing. And the two schools you mentioned, St Mary Magdalene Church of England Primary School in Peckham and Charlotte Sharman Foundation Primary School, which is up near West Graham with the Elephant and Castle. They both closed in August 2025 after a lengthy process that took place over a year. There are a number of steps within the closure of the school that have to be taken in terms of different consultation periods and so forth. So over that year, there was obviously a lot of work with the families who were concerned about the future of their children's education, understandably. So what we have found in the case of school closures, I mean, we had these 2 schools last year, but there were actually 8 primary schools have closed in the last 5 years. Not all closed by Southwark, some closed by Academy Change, for instance. But what we have found with that is that as soon as you start having those discussions, some parents are going to move their children as quickly as they can. which is understandable, but people want to know, have some certainty and some control over where their children are going. So we tend to find even well before you get to the stage where a formal decision has been taken to close the school, as soon as it's been raised as a possibility, parents start moving their children to other schools. And that can be a bit of a challenge. I mean, obviously you have to bear in mind that the reason these schools are in this position in the first place is typically because the numbers of children have already fallen to quite a low level. So that leaves you then, as the year goes on, with a smaller number of children in the school. What we've done through our school admissions team, we've allocated a dedicated school admissions officer to work with the school to support the parents in securing places for their children. So that's involved really some basic advice, making parents aware of what's available in the local area, and typically the schools that are closing are usually the worst affected, but there are often many other schools nearby who are eager to take on those children because they themselves have vacancies. So there's been some work done around arranging open days for parents so they can go around and see some of the other schools in the local area. And then we've run something like the process we run normally when parents apply for school places, a kind of preference exercise where parents tell us which schools they would prioritise their children going to. So looking at those two schools as a whole, so out of the 34 who applied to that process in the end, 26 were allocated to the first preference school. So that's most people are getting that, 5 the second preference. So there's only a couple of cases where we had to ask the parent to consider other schools. Charlotte Sharman, similar pattern. You'd ask whether it was amalgamation or closure. These were closures rather than amalgamations. In the case of an amalgamation, you're really looking to bring together the two schools under one of the Coburg school closed in Burgess Park. That did amalgamate with the school in on the other side of the park, now called Berlin Bush Primary School, so that in that case the two school communities came together. In that kind of instance, many of the children will end up going to one school. In the case of those closures, they varied really. I think in both schools there were a small number of schools where most parents sent their children, but people obviously also went far and wide. Some people, at that stage in their life, reconsidered moving out of the borough, for instance. But we were confident that all children were able to secure a place, and the overall majority were able to secure a place in their first preference school in the local area. In some cases where parents were choosing a school that was already full, that wasn't possible. I think for us as well, there's some practical things around cost. It costs money moving school, and one of the factors is school uniforms. So we did provide uniform vouchers to value £50 to all parents who had children who were leaving the school as a contribution towards those costs. Some children needed more support, particularly those children with an education, health and care plan, where moving the school requires a review of that plan and to identify a suitable provision for them to go to. Some of those children might need a bit more support in transition, so particularly those children with special educational needs, some work being done between the school where they're at now and the school they're moving to make sure there's a smooth transition. And there's a lot of things about, for instance, making sure the child's file goes from school A to school B, for instance. So overall, I think, no one can deny that the process of closing school is going to be disruptive at some level for parents and children, but I do believe we managed to be quite successful in moving those children on. And in terms of how they're doing, we're not tracking those children individually, but in terms of our schools in Southwark, all primary schools were judged as good or outstanding in the last Ofsted inspection. Although the Ofsted inspection framework has now changed, but that's a whole other scenario I won't go into from September, so we're no longer allowed to use that as a measure. But yeah, we're confident that all our schools are good and outstanding schools, so we're confident those children will be getting a good education in Southwark.
Thank you very much. Obviously, it's a fairly brief paper. Yep, just a couple of pages. I guess, does that indicate in your view that it went smoothly and actually there's not much to report, or do you think there's things that are missing?
Well, it would be possible theoretically to give a lot more information about individual children, but I don't think that would be appropriate. But in terms of wider lessons, we are continuing looking at lessons learned, and I think this template we applied here was really the result of the lessons learned from 5 years of previous experiences. Well, at the start with maybe it wasn't quite so smooth. I think the thing about the dedicated person is very important. I think starting early with some of the children, particularly more complex children, I still say even with these children, that would be lesson learned, but some of the more complex cases, you probably need to start earlier on. There is a dilemma there, isn't there? Because you can't, you're always proceeding at risk, because you can't wait until a final decision has been taken before you start planning for those children to move. But by starting to plan before a decision has been taken, you run the risk of preempting the decision. But our focus is on the children, and we say, well, if we don't start working with the families now, there's a risk these children won't have a school place. There's always the possibility that if the school closure doesn't go ahead, then they're warning ready to move quite clearly. But you do have to proceed really in advance of decisions being taken.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you very much. I have 3 questions, and it's more. Some of them are more my memory, or needing your memory rather than my memory.
Yeah.
So Charlotte Sharman, it says the majority or the largest number went to St Jude's, which is nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right in thinking that was the one that there were discussions of merging with? So that's my first question. My second one is, I think quite rightly we've talked about the pupils here and how they're faring. Just wanted to get a sense of, one of the things that came up in one of the previous meetings was that the teachers potentially would find it quite easy to find new employment because of shortages in the teaching profession, but thinking about those other jobs in schools, so for example teaching assistants, administrative staff, cleaning, people who worked in providing meals, those kind of things, how they're getting on. Lollipop people, I don't know what they're called these days. I think they've got a special name. And then my last question was around the building, and how the buildings are being used, because once again I have a recollection that they can't be repurposed, they need to be retained for educational purposes, so it'd be helpful to understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's correct that in the lead up to Charlotte Sharman closing and the couple of years leading up to that, there had been explorations of other options, and one of them was some discussion between the governors of Charlotte Sharman and St Jude's Church of England Primary School, which was more or less opposite the school, about whether they might come together as one school on one site. That didn't proceed. It was quite difficult, I think, to bring together 2 very distinct school communities, and some of the parents who perhaps had chosen not to send their child to a faith-based school weren't necessarily happy about that being an outcome. So they didn't proceed, which left us in a position of the other option, which was to close Charlotte Sharman. However, quite a lot of parents in the end did indeed move to St Jude's as their nearest school, particularly older children, the upper age of the school. They'll be coming to an end of their primary education this year and next year, but some did move there. Other questions, I can't answer detailed questions about the staffing outcomes. I wasn't particularly involved in the HR side, so I'd have to go and check the details of destinations for particular categories of staff. On the buildings, it's quite a complex picture depending on who actually owns the land, who owns the buildings. In the case of Charlotte Sharman, it's what's called a foundation primary school. So in that instance, I wish we only had 2 in Southwark, and we only got 1. A foundation primary school, the land and the buildings actually belong to the foundation, and the foundation is, in a sense, the governing body of the school. So when the school closes, the governing body is disbanded, and therefore the foundation no longer exists. So it's then for the Secretary of State for Education to determine the future of the site. In most cases, they rule that it reverts to the local authority. But we're still awaiting the final outcome of the Secretary of State's determination on the Charlotte Sharman site. In terms of...
Okay, and Mary St Mary.
So Mary Magdalene was actually owned by the church. That's not straightforward either, because the Church of England, as you may know, includes a number of different bodies. I believe in this case it's not owned by the Diocesan Board of Education. I believe it's owned by a trust that's linked specifically to church in Peckham. So ultimately it's for the church to determine the future of that site. But we are in discussions with them about potential uses for special education needs or other uses. They're really keen that it continues to be used for some similar purpose.
That's really helpful. So basically, with the schools, the primary schools that have already closed, in terms of the building, there could be different outcomes that relate to them depending on who actually owns them.
Yeah, and who owns which part of them as well. There's some Charlotte Sharman being an example where the majority of the building was owned by the foundation, but there are areas of the building and playground which actually belong to the local authority. So it's a bit of a it's a bit of work to untangle, and that's like one of the lessons we learned from this is to try and identify some of those issues early on because they're not easy to work through.
Councillor Nance, and I'll come to you.
Thank you. I was just going to ask about buildings. So I suppose it would be interesting to understand a little bit more about what those options going forward would be, but I suppose if we don't have any more information on that, then maybe that's premature. The assumption's been that, we know the demographic indicators suggests that, we know that some of the neighbouring boroughs also have had to close schools, and there is a general sort of trend of falling rolls at the moment. Do you think that we've sort of done as much as we need to do on this? I mean, would you see sort of further closures down the line? How do you sort of look at that forward trajectory?
Yeah, well, there are no plans to close schools at the moment. I think the challenge hasn't gone away. The numbers are still falling. I think possibly Southwark was hit by the wave of falling numbers more severely and earlier than some other local authorities. So we have taken quite a lot of action, where some other local authorities are only beginning to do so now. So there are certainly some schools who've still got low numbers and falling numbers. I think there's some hope to be taken from the fact that the falling numbers of births seems to be leveling out a bit. I mean, between 2010 and say 2024, we lost about 1,800 children a year being born in Southwark. You translate that into how many classes of children that looks like. It's a lot of empty classrooms. But the most recent figures, which were from 2024, I think we've only reduced by maybe about 20 or 30 from the year before, and the projections from the GLA and others are, well, there's going to be a big increase back to former levels, but the population will bottom out at this lower level and become more stable. So I think we might still see some reduction in numbers in primary coming into primary reception for the next couple of years, but it is beginning to level out. However, but that younger cohort, that smaller younger cohort, as it moves through the school, you then start seeing lower numbers in the upper years of the school. And I suppose the challenge is that's just beginning, I think, to be seen in Year 7 in secondary schools. So I don't know if you're aware, but one of the secondary schools in Southwark, Southbank University Academy, they've been consulting on some significant changes to the school. They're not looking to fully close the school, but what they're looking to do is over time to transition from being a secondary school with a sixth form to just being a sixth form. So they will no longer be admitting children in the younger age range. They were consulting on that earlier this year, as I understand it, because we're an academy school, we don't have any role in the decision making, and that again sits with the Department for Education to make that final decision to approve that. But that will be the first time we've seen a secondary school effectively closing its secondary statutory school age provision. And we are involved in that as well in terms of we have no role in the decision. We're also we're going to need to support that school in making sure all those children have got somewhere to go. There are secondary schools nearby that are offering places, and we have also secured through the Exchequer Services team to fund uniform vouchers for those pupils as well.
Thank you. Can I?
You can ask a follow-up, yes.
Yeah, do this one.
I wondered what you sort of your feeling of the personal impact on the families. I mean, obviously, it some people, if they're just going from one school across the road to St Jude's, then that may be sort of relatively untraumatic. But I mean, generally, what is your feel for how people reacted to the decisions and the longer term sort of impact on people in terms of how they feel about what's happened?
Well, I don't think any parent would be delighted to know their child's school's closing late and they're going to have to move them. I do think children generally are quite resilient, and actually if you look independently of school closures, there's a huge amount of mobility and churn through our schools throughout the year. We have a lot of pupils moving into the borough, we have a lot of people moving out of the borough all the time. So it's not uncommon as an experience for children growing up in Southwark, but I don't want to minimise the impact it has. I think a lot depends on their experience of where their friends go, whether the new school is a place they feel safe and happy in.
Thank you. Councillor Von Bies.
In a similar vein, you say under ongoing progress that you can't track individual pupils, which I understand, but is there any plan to maybe follow up in a year or two to gather information on how this has gone according to the parents, maybe the teachers, including those at the former schools, just to have a learning experience and potential lessons if we do have further closures at primary level?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is some ongoing conversations happening. We meet with the schools regularly through our school improvement advisors and other staff. And we have those discussions about how's the new cohort settling in. Obviously, a group of children move from one school to another. You want those children to then start integrating with the rest of the children, not staying apart as a separate group. So we do get feedback from the school about how particular groups of children are going, and we do offer advice around that, settling children and so on. Potentially, you could do some ongoing work on that. It would obviously require a resource to do what would effectively be a kind of research project if you were looking at more kind of quantitative measures.
Mana?
Right.
Thank you very much. You mentioned that in the past couple of years, there's been about 8 primary school closure, including Charlotte, Sherman, and St. Mary Magdalene. Don't you think that besides the following rule, you will have done much to prevent those closures?
Well, there are options. I think, when the numbers of children fall in a school has a number of different impacts. One of the main ones is financially, because through the government's funding formula, schools get funded according to the numbers of children attending. So, as the number of children falls, so does the income. And that means schools can really struggle to maintain a good standard of education. For instance, a good, well-resourced school, as well as having staff, will be extra resources, for school trips, for materials and books and equipment. A school that's really struggling with numbers will ultimately find it very hard to maintain that level of resource for children. But a closure is by no means the only possible outcome. some schools, for instance, that we've worked with have looked at how they can share some of their costs, maybe by going to federation with another school, where, for instance, they might have one head teacher over 2 or more schools, and they're sharing the cost between them. That makes them more viable going forward. Other schools have looked at other ways they can bring in income. Can they make use of some of their spare space? You know, we have schools, many of our schools now have out-of-school provision, wraparound childcare, breakfast clubs, after-school clubs, perhaps some nursery on site. So that's one of the ways schools have looked at both meeting the needs of the children and their families, but also potentially generating some income. So all our schools are being challenged by this issue, but it's only in a very small number of cases where it's felt that a closure might be the final outcome, and the only possible one.
Yeah. Okay. In addition, despite the following rules, didn't you also think that, like housing issues, such as temporary accommodation, most parents have been placed out of boroughs, is seriously impacting the school, these following rules in schools and the attendance? Because I know some parents, for instance, they live in Southwark, they attend school around Peckham area.
Yeah.
They move them to like Ilford, some beyond Croydon areas, and it's seriously affecting them, and they have to travel from those distances to come to school in Southwark. Didn't you think that, is there any role you can play to help address those issues? Because it's also seriously impacting the attendance or the people's number.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think that is the case in some cases. I don't really know about addressing the housing side of that, but I don't know whether it's having a big effect on the schools overall. I think the much bigger effect is that really people are just having fewer children. There is a housing dimension to that. I think affordability of housing in central London is an issue. I'm sure we can think of people we know who maybe have moved out of areas like Southwark when they have children because they want a property which they wouldn't be able to afford to rent or buy in Southwark. So there's certainly a link between housing affordability and falling roles, but there's bigger issues as well to do with smaller family sizes generally across the whole of the developed world, really. I mean, I've been so mentioned this when I think my own grandparents, they came from families of 10 children, and then they had 3 children, and I've had 2 children. You know, you can probably all see this in family history, so we go back into it. You know, there are less children being born, and ultimately, as a society, we need to adjust to that in terms of how many schools we need.
Absolutely, yeah. Women can make different choices now too,
Yes.
Which I think should always be acknowledged. Claire?
How many forms of entry were both those schools?
By the time they closed, I think they were both single forms of entry, but they had started out as, well, Mary Magdalene definitely was. Yeah, Charlotte Shelton was by that point, but they had both been bigger schools in the past. Well, Charlotte Shelton had been 2-form entry school in the past.
And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but do you know how many kids were being admitted, what the admissions numbers were at the point that they decided that they should consult on the closure?
I don't know exactly right now, no. But I think they were, in St Mary Magdalene, it was getting down to around 10. I can't remember the final figure of Charlotte Shelton, but we have many schools in Southwark. Well, not many, but we have several schools in Southwark where numbers are down, below 10 a year joining the school.
Thank you.
For a class of 30.
And just building on that, I remember when I was on this commission 3 years ago, we were looking at falling school roles a lot.
Yeah.
And I recall at the time the GLA's methodology for predicting roll numbers was being quite heavily scrutinised, and they changed it, if I'm remembering correctly. So hearing you tonight say that the GLA's predictions now are showing a plateau, how much confidence do you have in that prediction?
Well, I would say it's certainly an exact science. The GLA themselves do a number of different models for their projections, one of which involves looking at housing. So obviously when you're projecting how many children are going to be living in an area, you're thinking about how many families are living there now, but you're also thinking, well, they're going to build 1,000 new homes like Canderwater or whatever, and from that, the term they use is chilled yield. I just not your term, but anyway, which is an assumption about how many children might be living in this new housing, and then feeding that into their population projections. So it's something to go on, but as we know, these housing developments can go from many different directions compared to where they were originally intended, and you can't necessarily control who moves in there, and you certainly can't control whether or not they choose to have children. So it's never easy that. But so I personally, my starting point is looking at the actual numbers of children that are being born in Southwark, because that's an actual fact, and they've been counted. So if those numbers are going down and down, then I would be very disbelieving about projections suggesting that the population's suddenly going to increase. But if those numbers are levelling out, then I think that would give me some confidence that numbers of the population, school population, might level out as well. But again, you don't know how many of those people born, babies born in Southwark end up growing up in Southwark, and then we want to move out.
Yeah, definitely. And last question from me. The Keeping Education Strong strategy, which obviously lots of effort has been put into that, we've heard about it here at the Commission before. Do you see a direct impact from that in terms of how this closure process went? Do you think there's a link there, or is it just a kind of ambiguous strategy over there that feels a bit disconnected?
Yeah, and I think the strategy was a really good driver of this, because we looked very wide at our needs, and we then agreed a programme, not just of school closures, that was the last resort. There were a number of schools, in fact a large number of schools, who had reductions in the number of children they were admitting, for instance. Obviously, quite rightly, we always look at it from the point of view of the schools that have closed, from the point of view of the schools that have remained open. Often arguably, painful as the process is, it's some schools reducing the numbers is going to enable those other schools to remain open, because those pupils then have to go to the other schools, or the new pupils coming in go to those remaining schools who might previously have been spread more thinly over a larger number of schools. So some of the schools have benefited from that strategy in terms of a reduction in competition for places.
Got it. Great. Fab. Well, thank you. That was really interesting, and it's great to hear that there's been lots of learnings applied here. Clearly, I think it went okay. I don't think there's lots in the way of recommendations that we can make, but you have cited some learnings throughout, which we've recorded, so we'll reflect on those. Is there anything else anyone wants to recommend specifically in relation to this? No?
It's this point around the advance warning that I think is really complicated, right? Because as you say, people need time to plan. But I think with all of the school closures that have happened, it's almost like the writing was on the wall. Like, the minute the conversation was started, it was clear that they were going to close. And so how could that possibly get managed better in a way that doesn't then start this situation where people are kind of fleeing a school and then causing it to close? I mean, is it the impossible question?
It's in the conundrum. I'm not going to cast shade on my neighbouring boroughs, but I would say that in some of the local authorities, they have put out a wide consultation around a large number of schools who might be in scope of closure, and then ultimately not being able to proceed with them. And I think some of the schools, maybe you can potentially destabilise schools if you start having those discussions before you've really decided whether that's the best option. So you can either prevent the outcome of the consultation, people can come up with all ideas, councillors and others may have different views on it. But I think one of the things I would say was you shouldn't really start having those discussions unless you're really confident there's a very strong case to proceed. You obviously have to be open to other ideas and open to challenge, but you don't want to start having casual conversations about, I'm not too sure about your school, because that does as you say, can create a momentum of its own, which is very destabilising.
Tricky. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for coming to see us. It was really great. Yeah, you're welcome to stay for the final bits, but we'll be wrapping up very soon. So, yeah, just thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so we are coming to the end of the meeting. So the final agenda item for tonight is the proposed work programme. We are on our penultimate meeting this cycle, so there's not really that much more we can do. I think next time we're expecting to hear from Councillor Batterson, so we haven't yet done Councillor Batterson's cabinet member interview, and of course his portfolio is something that we look at in terms of local economy and yes, we'll also have, well, I'd like to have a good discussion about recommendations at the next meeting, which is quite early, but of course it's an election year, which is why our last meeting is just in 3 weeks' time, I think. 2 weeks' time, damn it, quite soon. Tuesday? 3 weeks' time. As an amount of time that everyone should know about because it's in your diary. So consult your diary. Okay, it is in 3 weeks' time. My goodness. 26, there we go. Yes, so that we can try and get some draft recommendations to Cabinet before the election sort of takes over. I think that would be ideal. But yes, so in terms of Councillor Patterson's session, we'll be hearing from him with a holistic overview of the strategies and projects under his portfolio. And something that the Commission's been particularly interested in this year around what his officers are doing are sort of repairs in commercial units. That's come up quite a few times. Seems there's been quite a few issues there that I think would be good for us to dig into, particularly in regards to timeliness, compensation, that kind of thing. And leaks from above being a specific challenge that I think councillors will be well aware of, where they have constituents living in wards where there are a lot of businesses, and likewise businesses being unfortunately affected by council properties where leaks are not addressed. So yeah, quite a niche issue, but actually something that we are increasingly hearing about. So quite a short meeting. If anybody does think we need to dig into anything else in that meeting, I'm happy to hear suggestions. Obviously we don't have lots of time to give officers in particular a heads up, and we have had a problem on the Commission this year with getting papers in on time, so I would be keen if there are any ideas to discuss them tonight and put them forward as soon as possible. But yeah, I'll open it up to the group. No, well, in that case, we can have a short meeting. Okay, wow, we're well ahead of time. That's great news. Maybe we won't. Can you say that now?
Yeah, so I just wanted to reiterate the point about the reports. If we can get them in good time, that would be helpful, because then we can scrutinise things better. I think there was also, fully agree on the repairs and the compensation. There's the High Streets update as well, isn't there? What
that would be separate to Councillor Batterson's overall interview. What's it called?
Well, there was the street market, but there was also the town centre plans and what they were doing.
The town centre action plans.
Yes, it would be good to have an update on what's going on there.
Yes, it would be, because we did some pre-scrutiny on that last year, didn't we? Yes, so, well, Councillor Batterson will be coming anyway, so I think we could probably just extend. It should be a part, but if we need to and we want to dig deeper, we'll just extend his by about 10 minutes. I think we'll have plenty of time. Okay, cool. All right. Claire?
It's not to do with this, but when would the dates come out for the meetings after the election, out of interest, if you know?
I mean, usually quite quickly after, within a matter of weeks. Yeah, so we often have a first meeting in the cycle in July. I would expect by the end of May, those dates would have been set.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, right, well thanks everybody, have a lovely evening.
Thank you.